Hello and welcome to another edition of Ideological. I'm your host, Zach Lee, and today we are talking about a figure that you might not know a ton about, but his influence is absolutely enormous. Like, I cannot emphasize to you enough what a big deal this guy is. He's bigger than I'm trying to think of someone huge today. He's bigger than Taylor Swift, who is very, very popular. He makes Taylor Swift look like a blonde girl that just sings songs to teenagers, which actually I think is what she is anyway. Just kidding. She is a big fan of the show. Taylor, hey, call me back. Hope you're doing great. She's got her Swifties. We've got, ideologues or Lee lovers or something. Think of a fun name that we can call those that love the show. Anyway, today we are talking about a guy who's even bigger than Taylor Swift, even bigger than The Rock, We're talking about Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. I know, you sound so excited. You look excited. Everyone wants to talk about Hegel. Who is this guy? Why is he a big deal? Why is he important? He is one of the most influential philosophers of all time. He's certainly the most influential philosopher of the 19th century, and he's probably in the top 5 most influential philosophers of all time. So he's there with the big boys, right? If I were to take probably the most influential, not saying right or wrong, but influential philosophers in history, it's probably Plato, Aristotle, Descartes, Kant, and Hegel. So we're going to be talking about him. His thought, whether people agreed with it or disagreed with it, would give birth to Marxism, existentialism, historicism, pragmatism, phenomenology, and even positivism. And so his influence is enormous. Isaiah Berlin, the philosopher and sociologist, said this of Hegel. Listen to this praise, and then a guy named Arthur Schopenhauer, who's a German philosopher that hates Hegel. We're going to see. Let's listen to some good and the bad as we start thinking about who this Hegel character is. Isaiah Berlin said, "No thinker has ever exercised such a powerful influence on the intellectual and political history of the modern world as Hegel." Whoa, that's high praise. But he also has his critics. Listen to this. Arthur Schopenhauer is just, he's this cynical, pessimistic philosopher. Here's what he's going to say about Hegel. Listen to this. This is a total slam, right? Like when somebody gets owned on social media, this is it. He says, Hegel, who for political and indeed mistaken purposes was from above dubbed a great philosopher, a commonplace, inane, loathsome, repulsive, and ignorant charlatan, who with unparalleled effrontery compiled a system of crazy nonsense that was trumpeted abroad as immortal wisdom by his mercenary followers, and was actually regarded as such by blockheads, whereby such a complete chorus of admiration arose as had never before been known. The extensive intellectual activity that was forcibly usurped by such a man resulted in the mental ruin of a whole generation of scholars. Holy shit. Okay, so that's Hegel has a huge influence, whether you love him or hate him. Now, before we get into this lesson, let me give you a warning here. This is not a disclaimer. I'm not going to talk about anything too inappropriate, This is going to be a very difficult technical lesson. You should probably skip it. Some of the other episodes are so much more fun. If you are a super nerd, you'll love this. If you've had some training in philosophy, hopefully at the graduate level, but at least at the undergraduate level, you'll probably love this. If you're still a virgin, you'll probably love this. But if you're somebody that this is not your jam, just skip it. This will be more technical. There is no way to make Hegel accessible. So I will do my best. A lot of times students complain about how difficult he is to read and what he's saying and all of that. So I'm going to do my best to summarize this. But keep in mind, if this is not your jam, skip it. He's a big deal. You should up your jam. But I get it. All right. So know that this is going to be difficult. I've used a bunch of resources, as I always do. A special thank you, though, to Frederick Beiser at Syracuse University. I found that his research on Hegel has even challenged my own thinking on Hegel. It's changed my mind on a few things, so I always want to give a shout out. He and I are homies, we hang out and listen to Taylor Swift together. So let's talk about Hegel. Or you can, now's your chance to get away if this is too much. For the rest of you, the elites, here we go. Let's talk about his early life. He was born, okay? He hasn't always existed. He's not eternal. He was born on August 27th, 1770 in Stuttgart. His dad was a civil servant. His mom died when he was 11, which is sad. And several generations of Hegels had been Protestant ministers. Hegel, though, would never consistently embrace and live in a Lutheran way in his faith or his actions. We're actually going to see that he's a pretty big critic of the traditional way of doing Christianity. Although he's not an atheist, he's very strongly a theist, and we'll talk about that in a second. He began Latin school at the age of 5, no big deal. He studied at a Protestant seminary called the Tübinger Stift, okay, which was affiliated with Tübingen. Today, Tübingen and the University of Tübingen is kind of a big deal. This is not the same thing, but there was a light affiliation back then. But he's starting out at a Protestant seminary. A lot of major philosophers will start studying theology first and then kind of convert over to philosophy. Heidegger does a similar thing. He was roommates with the philosopher Friedrich Schelling and the poet Friedrich Hölderlin. Okay, so I don't know if you know these names. This is like the ultimate roommate situation. It's like if Kobe and Michael Jordan and LeBron James were all roommates, that's kind of what's going on here at this seminary. They start this book club. They read all these ancient works in Greek. It's a big deal. You'll notice, by the way, just as a pause, Germany will come to prominence as a major intellectual and philosophical powerhouse, but they're late to the game. During the Enlightenment, it's really England and France that are the major players. They're the ones putting out the Voltaires and the Diderots and the John Locke's and all these kind of things, or the UK rather, because Scotland and Ireland and stuff are involved. And Germany doesn't have as much to say. They've got some figures. They've got people like Leibniz, who's culturally German, although he writes most of his major works in French. From about Kant onwards, the Germans will take over. Germany was this collection of feudal duchies for the longest time, and so they kind of have a little man syndrome. And so they're eventually going to produce, Kant and Hegel and Schopenhauer and Schelling and Fichte and Nietzsche and like all these major players are going to be German. So this episode brought to you by Germany. Germany, we love war. Okay, so he's a weird guy, Hegel. He is gross looking. He kind of looks like if an owl was caught in a rainstorm. That's kind of how he looks all the time. He struggled with melancholy. He had a son with his cleaning lady. So at least he's had sex at least once. He had pet parrots and thought that drinking wine daily was good for his health. I actually read somewhere that his doctor gave him this thing saying that he could drink wine for his health so he didn't have to pay taxes on wine, which is awesome. He is an academic. He was a professor of philosophy at the University of Jena, the University of Heidelberg, and the University of Berlin. He was, however, that's ironic in what I'm about to say, he was a horrible lecturer. He stuttered, horrible. He stuttered. He moved in a jerky manner. He gasped for breath. You know how like fat people sleep. And then they're just like, or whatever, right? So, and he over-repeated the word also in German, over and over again. So he's kind of Tourette'sy when he speaks, right? So he's speaking, and then he gets back and he's twitchy. So he's, I know that's not PC, but I don't care. I'll do what I want. So he's a weird guy, weird lecturer. The following people, though, were his students. Ludwig Feuerbach, the psychologist who's going to say that humans create God by projecting our needs of like a daddy figure onto the sky. Karl Marx. Pay attention to that. That's going to be very important. Marx explicitly turns Hegel on his head. I'll have another lesson on Marx where I basically show that he does not understand Hegel. You cannot divorce Hegel's thought from his metaphysics, period. And anybody that thinks you can, you should make fun of, and you should... just post negative things about them online. And Bruno Bauer. Okay. Soren Kierkegaard had Hegelian professors, although he's Danish, but he would become a strong critic of Hegel. But as far as people that were directly students, Feuerbach, Marx, and Bauer. He died, Hegel did. He's not still alive again. He's not immortal. On November the 14th in 1831 in Berlin at the age of just 61. Okay. What is his goal? Again, pay attention. Slap yourself, because this guy's a big deal, but his philosophy is very difficult. You kind of have to read a bunch of Hegel to read any of Hegel, okay? Let me tell you what he's trying to do. He is trying to keep the political freedom that comes out of the French Revolution. He's trying to keep the reason and the rationality of the Enlightenment, but he wants to do it in a German way. What does that mean? It means he's wearing lederhosen and eating, Wiener Schnitzels or something. No, what it means is he wants to take the rationality of the Enlightenment. He wants to take the idea of progress and advancement, but he wants to maintain a view of religion and God, and he wants to maintain a view of community. Some Enlightenment thinkers, if you think of guys like Diderot, are like getting rid of God altogether, but they're very individualistic. Hegel wants to take what's good in the Enlightenment, but make it within a community in kind of this Prussian German area where he lives. But he also wants to maintain some sort of view in God. After all, he's German, and it's uniquely German to kind of follow in the footsteps of Luther and have some sort of God. He wants to create a philosophy also of everything. So again, let me tell you again why Hegel's a big deal. Some philosophers are known for just impacting a few areas of philosophy. Maybe they just talk about metaphysics, they just talk about logic, they just talk about ethics. Hegel is doing big boy philosophy and theology. Big boy philosophy, though, okay? He wants to have a system that encompasses literally everything. God, history, our minds, community, politics, ethics. He is doing big boy, put your pants on, pull up those lederhosen. He's doing big boy philosophy. The goal is to become more free and more self-aware for humans and for God. He wants to find a way, this is about to get technical, he wants to find a way to unite Kant's separation between the noumena and the phenomena, and he wants to find a way to link the infinite and the finite. Okay, bear with me. Hegel's difficult, but I'm here to help you. My driving passion in life is to take big concepts and make them accessible to the average person. So if you're below average, there's other podcasts for you, but if you're average, you can do this. Kant separated the noumena, that's a thing as it is in and of itself, my phone, as it is in and of itself, from the phenomena, which is my experience of the phone. We cannot access the noumena. I cannot access this desk. I cannot access this phone, whatever, directly. My mind, my cognitive apparatus, is going to lay a grid of things onto the noumena. I can't experience it directly. It's got to go through my mind. So my mind, and this is responding to Hume, is gonna take things like time, space, causation, substance, and it's going to lay it on the things so that I can have phenomena. Hegel wants to find a way to link those together because after all, how can you know anything about the noumena if it all has to go through the cognitive apparatus of your mind? Also, he wants to unite the infinite and the finite. Okay, bear with me. Hey, listen, pay attention. Go do some push-ups, something. Wake yourself up. Listen to what I'm about to say. If we're talking about all reality, we're talking about infinite. That includes the absolute, the undefined, God, infinite. But there's also things that are finite, things that are not infinite. Desks, chairs, humans, politics, etc. He wants to have a system that will have both. Because the infinite is supposed to encompass everything. Infinite means everything that there is, right? But if infinite takes on the finite, there's a contradiction. If the infinite excludes the finite, then now the infinite is finite. It's limited because there's this finite that doesn't fall within its circle. So if you think of the infinite as a circle, the finite should fit within that, but that's a contradiction. But if the infinite is a circle, but there's another circle out here of the finite, then it's not really infinite because there's something that it doesn't include, and it's supposed to include the whole thing. Can Hegel solve that problem? Again, love him or hate him, you can't not deal with him if you're a thinker. If you live post the 19th century, which I'm assuming 100% of people watching this do, then you got to deal with Hegel. Okay, that's what he's trying to do. He uses difficult language. What he's going to say is, and this is a very famous dictum, I think this comes from the Philosophy of Right. I need to look up again where this is from, but he's got this saying, which is the rational is the real and the real is the rational. So let me explain what that means. When he says the real is the rational, what he means is there's a good reason for whatever there is, and that there's reason in present institutions. When he says the rational is the real, what he means is the standards of reason will be realized in history. Reason is a self-actualizing end. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a second. All right. If you're already confused, and you're like, Zach, you said infinite. I didn't even know finite was a word. What does this mean? Zach, you're being so prolix. You're pontificating. You're using all these. Just buckle up because Hegel is extremely difficult to understand. So let me just say this. This is a big complaint against Hegel. He is very difficult to understand. That's true. I'm not the only one that thinks that. Everyone thinks that. This is a common complaint with Hegel. Again, back to Arthur Schopenhauer, a guy who hates Hegel. He's like his nemesis. They're both professors, and Schopenhauer's kind of jealous that people like Hegel. But he says this about Hegel. Listen to this. You want to talk about an ultimate smack talk? Listen to this. But the height of audacity in serving up sheer nonsense, in stringing together senseless and extravagant mazes of words, such as had previously only been heard in madhouses, was finally reached in Hegel, and became the instrument of the most ponderous general mystification that has ever taken place, with a result which will appear fabulous to posterity and will remain as a lasting monument of German stupidity. Let's just take a break. If anyone's ever said something mean to you, it's probably not that good. Hegel's extremely hard to interpret. He repeats the same thing over and over and over again. He uses all this technical jargon. He has his own kind of dictionary that you have to learn to really be able to understand Hegel. Reading his most well-known work, Phenomenology of Spirit, is like chewing gravel. Okay, so now that we know who he is, what he's trying to do, we understand that he's very difficult to understand. Let me give you his major ideas and help you out. I'm your boy. I'm your Hegelian wingman. If you're trying to pick him up at a bar, I'm going to help you out. Okay. Major ideas. Number one, the unification of contradicting ideas. Most scholars, when I say this, will disagree with me, but I'm right. Okay. Hegel does embrace contradiction. He just says that he's not doing that. If you understand that for most philosophers, they're trying to not have a contradiction. What is a contradiction? It's where you say that both something is and is not in the same time and in the same way. You're contradicting yourself. It breaks the law of non-contradiction. You cannot say that something both is and is not and mean those terms in the same way at the same time. That doesn't make any sense. It's a contradiction. It's what a falsehood is. My view, and the view of other scholars, is that Hegel does embrace contradiction. Now, the reason a lot of guys will critique me on this is they'll say, Hegel's trying to avoid contradiction. Contradiction means you're wrong. Agreed. Hegel would say something like this. He doesn't say it this way explicitly because he's not clear. But, he would say, so I would say a contradiction is A and not A at the same time. That's a contradiction. A and minus, not then, A. He would say that those are just two different sides of totality. If we're talking about everything that is, there's its thing and its negation. So those aren't a contradiction. So he's going to say it's not a contradiction. Other scholars will defend him and say it's not a contradiction. I think if you take his thought to its logical end, he embraces contradiction. The reason you need to understand that is it will make it much easier to, when you just realize that he's contradicting himself, you'll be like, okay, I at least understand what he's trying to say. It's got to be wrong, but I understand it. Okay. Now, I'm not saying it is wrong. I'm just saying I think contradiction is a big part of his philosophy. He does not see it that way at all. And a lot of scholars would say he does not see it that way. I think that if you drag out his philosophy to its implications, it is contradictory. But let me give you some words out of his own mouth, in case you don't believe me. This one comes from Phenomenology of Spirit. He says this: the more conventional group opinion gets fixated on the antithesis of truth and falsity, meaning they're too focused on true and false, binary. The more it tends to expect a given philosophical system to be either accepted or contradicted, and hence it finds only acceptance or rejection. It does not comprehend the diversity of philosophical systems as the progressive unfolding of truth, but rather sees it in simple disagreements. He's saying the other system is to take it or leave it. I'm trying to encompass the entire thing. And if that's not explicit enough, in Philosophy of Mind, he says this: ordinary logic is therefore in error of supposing that mind is something that completely excludes contradiction from itself. On the contrary, all consciousness contains a unity and separation, hence a contradiction. So he's agreeing with me that he's contradicting things. He just doesn't think it's a traditional contradiction, that it's wrong. It's just a way of embracing the whole, which includes things and its separation. Anyway, if you stop trying to make him so consistent, he'll make more sense. That's all I'm trying to say. For most of history, people have held to what is called a correspondence theory of truth. What does that mean? A sentence is true, a proposition is true, if it matches reality. If there's a cat sitting on the mat and I say, there's a cat sitting on the mat, that's true. If I say, there's not a cat sitting on the mat, that's false. To say what is that it is and what's not that it's not is true, to quote Aristotle. Okay. Hegel is not playing in that game. Hegel is going to propose, and not propose, other people had mentioned this too, but he's going to function in more of what is called a coherence theory of truth. Truth is when the entire system fits with itself, when the parts of the system fit with other parts in the system, not necessarily with how things are in reality. Think of it like a spider's web. All the parts are overlapping, and you can't pull one thread on the spider web without it moving the whole web. That is more his style when it comes to truth. Okay, it's going to get worse. Are you ready? Number 2, the dialectic of Geist. Zach, what the hell did you just say? The dialectic of Geist. This point number 2 is Hegel's philosophy. So pay attention. If you're like, what are we talking about? Cats are on mats. You said something about Taylor Swift. Don't kill yourself. Pay attention. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to break it down. Hang in there. Listen to this lecture several times. Send it to your friends. Let's talk about this idea. The dialectic of Geist is the central theme of Hegel's philosophy. Let's take these terms in reverse order. When he uses the German word Geist, or sometimes he says Weltgeist, world mind, Geist means spirit, mind, ethereal, world spirit, God. It's linked to human culture and human mind and human ideas. That's what Geist means. Okay, think God/world spirit. Don't think of the Judeo-Christian God. Okay, he's not thinking of a personal Judeo-Christian God like in Judaism, Christianity, or Islam or something like this. His God is the formal and final cause of all things. It's God knowing himself in the other. It involves this collective subjectivity of mankind. When we think of a famous murderer, O.J. Simpson, and we think of his trial, it's the people versus O.J. Simpson. What do we mean by the people? We mean like a collective consciousness, right? The values of the society, the way that people think about things. Hegel will use phrases like being in itself, that's just something that exists, or being for itself, that's something that knows that it exists. So this is being in itself, I'm being for itself because I know that I exist. He's not exactly a pantheist either, because that would get rid of the changing shapes in the evolution of Geist. Zach, what are you saying? Let me say it this way. God for Hegel, to come to full self-realization, to full self-actualization, to fully know himself, to fully be God, he has to have his other. That's creation. And God evolves as the world evolves, and they evolve together. So God is continually learning more about himself by finding himself in the other, creation, throughout world history. Let me give you a little definition of this that I made. We're not going to put it on the screen. Just listen. Look at these green eyes, this green shirt. Listen. God and the world are intimately linked and both evolve over history. An idea is posited, but eventually leads to a contradiction and distinction between that idea and its negation, or its separation. This then leads to a fuller new idea that encompasses both the idea and its opposing idea, so God comes to a greater self-realization over time through the interactions of history. To say it more simply, God needs humans just as much as humans need God. To give you a quote from Hegel, without the world, God is not God. We're going to talk about this in just a second. When we move to dialectic, okay, so that's his view of God, this ever-evolving world spirit that grows as humanity and collective consciousness grows. The word dialectic, what does this word mean? This is a big theme for Hegel. Dialectic means different things throughout philosophical history. For the Greeks, it was typically just logical conversation back and forth was dialectic. For Kant, the term took on a different meaning. It's where like reason tries to go beyond the bounds of what it can know and runs into some problems. That's dialectic for Kant. For Hegel, it is the changing and evolving of everything. It's realizing its inner necessity and movement that flows or follows from its concept. Let me give you an example. This is not a great example, but I'm going to give you some good examples in a second, some of which even Hegel uses himself. Let me give you an example. Again, this is not perfect. Take an example of marriage. I think that I know myself, but I don't truly know myself. I don't truly know what love is unless there's an other. There has to be an other to love, my wife. And throughout marriage, I actually realize myself more by seeing myself in the other, and she does with me. Love has to have this other. So there's this individual and its opposite and this other. And those things aren't bad. They're not just total separation. It's almost like a spiral where I find out more about her and she finds out more about me as we go. Or to say it another way, if you're a Democrat or a Republican, you will learn more about your position, not by doing what you're doing, which is just following your stuff in your echo chamber and trying to retweet to own the libs or the cons or whatever. You'll find more about your position by arguing with somebody who holds the opposite position in the other. You'll both grow, okay? Here's the way that it's traditionally explained with Hegel, and this is not exactly correct. So this is a crass oversimplification. And this language is not really from Hegel anyway, but follow me because it is a helpful tool that people use in pedagogy in explaining this idea. What people will say is when it comes to a Hegelian dialectic, that there is a thesis. There's an idea put forward. That's what a thesis is. There's its antithesis, its opposite. And then those two things come together and create a synthesis. And then that becomes a new thesis. And then there's a new antithesis and then a new synthesis. So you're making these steps forward as you go. God makes these steps forward, as do humans, as we evolve in our relationship to one another. Now, the idea of synthesis, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, that is not the kind of language that you'll get in Hegel that way. He does mention some of those terms. So what people generally say is that comes from a guy named Fichte. I have had trouble finding anywhere where Fichte does that. So that's just kind of a helpful way to describe these guys using language that perhaps is not the thing they're mainly going to harp on. Anyway, what does that mean? Let me give you an example. It means that throughout the evolving world spirit, throughout history, as history progresses, there's an end, there's a goal for God and for history. Full self-realization and full self-actualization. You have a unity, that's a thesis. You have difference, and then you have unity and difference. So you have a thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Or, to give an example that he uses, which is helpful, in a family, you have unity. People are working together. They're trying to do what's best for the family. There's a unity. In civil society, though, you have difference, right? You have individualism. People are just pursuing their own things. That'd be the antithesis to family. The synthesis would be the state. In the state, you have difference. You have individuals pursuing their own ends, but they're also doing what's best for the community. That's a great way to think of dialectic. You have subjective mind, objective mind, and their merger in absolute mind. If you're still confused, let me give you another example that Hegel uses explicitly, the Christian idea of the Trinity. Now, again, Hegel is not a traditional Orthodox Christian, but he uses the Trinity as an example. With the Trinity, you have God. There's only one, unity, God. But God is three persons, Father, Son, and Spirit. So you have difference. You have separation for Hegel. Theologians wouldn't call it that, but for Hegel, you have unity, you have separation, you have unity, you have difference. And then you have the synthesis, the Trinity, that there's one God who's three persons, but each person's fully God, but each person's not the other person. And so you say, well, that's a contradiction. And he's like, no, it just takes into account the whole system. It's a paradox. Okay, so he uses the Trinity as an example of kind of this, again, not exactly his language, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Okay, let me give you two quotes. One from Hegel, and then one from a professor who is Hegelian, or a Hegel scholar rather. Hegel says this. Zach, what are you saying? Go do a line of Coke real quick. Get some of that sweet nose candy. Get some of that stripper glitter, and then wake up and come back. Listen to this quote. This is what Hegel says in Philosophy of Mind about this. He says, God, i.e. the truth, as mind and regards mind, not as something quiescent, remaining in empty uniformity, but as something which necessarily enters the process of distinguishing itself from itself or positing its other, and which comes to itself only through this other and by the preserving sublation of this other, not by abandoning it. So he's saying God comes to greater self-realization through this other, not by getting rid of it, but by this merger. Let me give you another quote here. This is from Michael Inwood. He's a philosophy professor at Oxford. He says this: pure being with no specifications, is equivalent to nothing and passes over into nothing. Nothing, however, is equivalent to being. So it passes back into being. This oscillation between the two amounts to becoming. But becoming subsides and congeals into Dasein. That's a German word that means like being there, or specifically determinate being. A fusion of being and nothing. Clear as mud? I understand what he's saying. The question is it utter nonsense? Is it a contradiction in the logical sense and therefore false? That's the question that you need to try to answer. Okay. That's number two. I got a few more. That's the hardest one. That's the main part of Hegel's philosophy. If you understand that, you don't understand Hegel. No one understands. Hegel doesn't understand Hegel. But you're getting closer. Number three, oneism. Oneism. This is certainly not a phrase that Hegel uses. This comes from a philosopher whose name is Van Til. There are a bunch of different ways of viewing the world. This is an oversimplification, but think for a second of twoism versus oneism. Twoism is that the world is typically divided. There's a duality here. We have a tendency to think, especially coming out of the Enlightenment, that the world's divided into subject and object. That's like Kant. Or that it's divided into mind, things that are immaterial, and body, things that are material. That's Descartes. Or we have a tendency to think it's divided between self and other. There's a tendency for us to think there's difference, okay? Twoism. God is different than creation. Man is different than woman. Heterosexuality is a man and a woman, these different things. There's binary stuff. There's true and false. There's good and bad. That's the traditional worldview pre the modern era, but also in the modern era and Enlightenment. Okay, that's the way most people view the world. Oneism is where you get rid of that duality. You have a tendency to blur the lines. Blurred line. You have a tendency to blend these lines, and the infinite and the finite merge. God and creation merge, which is why God and the world are evolving in tandem with each other. It's why, in our cultural context today, why you see, for example, homosexuality promoted. It's oneism. It's unity without the difference. Good and bad are two binary. We don't see those as different categories, or true and false. Nothing's true. We become subjective. This all relates to our metaphysics. It relates to whether or not we see the kind of a twoism or a oneism framework. Very interesting, very helpful, I think, for understanding Hegel. Hegel is pushing towards the oneism. Also, what Hegel's trying to do is he uses the word notion. What is notion? For him, it's truth. It's the idea of something that's seen in relation to everything else, to the whole. Let me say it another way. Again, I'm doing my best. You're doing great. Hang in there. He's tricky. Hegel's tricky. But this will be the easiest introduction to Hegel you ever. If you just try to jump in and start reading him, which you should do, he'll crush you. He will crush you under the weight of his, what is the word that Ron Burgundy uses? Obstrulescence or whatever. Okay, so the Enlightenment taught us to view individual objects kind of in a vacuum. Okay, like we're just going to look at this biological thing. We're just going to look at this concept. We're just going to look at politics. For Hegel, to know something truly, you have to know everything about it. You have to know it from the view of God himself. So I can look at my desk and say, oh, it's made of wood and it has extension and I can rap on it. It has, I don't mean rap, I mean like hit with my knuckles. It has solidity. But really, the table's in relation to the goal of a table and its relation to the floor, because that's what holds it up, and its relation to its purpose of helping me put stuff on, or on which I put stuff. It's related to the concept of the only way to truly know the table is to know it from God's perspective in relation to everything else in the universe. Okay, so there is a oneism there that he's focusing on both metaphysically and epistemologically. Say it another way. My self-consciousness can only be known in relation to another self-consciousness. Hegel gives this famous demonstration of a lord and a bondservant. Who needs whom? Okay. The bondservant thinks he needs the Lord because the Lord provides him with his food and his protection. He lives on the Lord's land, etc. But the Lord also needs the bondservant because the bondservant makes his meals and dresses him and works the ground. In fact, the Lord is actually separated. He's alienated from his work. You see an echo of Marx here, because he doesn't work the ground like the bondservant does. And so, really what has to happen is there has to be this, the Lord finds out more about himself in the bondservant, and the bondservant finds out more about himself in the Lord. You need the two together. There'll be a clash of cultures. The bondservant could rebel and only find freedom when the Lord and the bondservant are fighting on common ground. Anyway, oneism. Number 4, historicism. What is historicism? There's a bunch of different definitions here. For our purposes, you just need to know this. One's values and cultures are the result of where they are in history. It's not, now, by the way, I'm not saying that Hegel agrees with this. Let me explain. Because Hegel always wants to have his cake and eat it too. He always wants to hold two things together. He critiques historicism, because he does think that there are these important objective things, but he also promotes historicism because there's such a focus on what's going on now in history. So what is historicism? There's not these objective standards that everyone can just appeal to. We're partially dependent upon the time and culture in which we live. Our values, what we think about the world or whatever, come to us from the time and history and culture in which we live. He doesn't mean that there's not a common goal of Geist. There is. But it does mean that these things are ever evolving and changing for us. Now, so to say it another way, he's not the father of historicism. Other people held this before Hegel. He's going to be a big promoter of it because he's going to link God and history. Because God evolves throughout history, you can't do theology or metaphysics without history as well. Now, most of us don't know this is happening. So I'm just going about my day. You know, I'm drinking my Red Bull, then I'm drinking alcohol, and I don't know if I have a high or a low, and I'm hanging with my wife, and I'm making jokes, and I'm doing all this research for you. You're getting a free graduate level education on some of these courses, and I'm doing all the work for you. You're welcome, by the way. You should retweet me more. Yeah, and I'm just living my life, and I don't know that I'm being used by Geist to bring world history to its end. But there are some figures for Hegel who do know that. Okay, these like world historical individuals, these like major players. He thinks of God. Think of somebody like Socrates or Martin Luther or Caesar or Napoleon. Hegel's got a big heart on for some of these guys. These are guys that kind of realize what they're doing. They're helping bring world history forward. They see like the goal, whereas most people don't see it. So he does see these like super elite people, these intellectuals, when it comes to the goal of world spirit, Weltgeist. Number 5. It's about to get a little bit easier. You've made it through most of the difficult things. You've done a great job, okay? Get you the Hegel t-shirt. Again, he looks like a baby bird that has been out in a rainstorm that's also on drugs, okay? He's very scary looking in some of his picture. He looks like, you know, the story of Hansel and Gretel. He probably looks like the witch if the witch was a man. Is that called a warlock? A witch-o? I don't know. All right. A redefinition of Christianity. You cannot, listen, I'm going to say this very strongly. You cannot try to divorce Hegel's views from his view of God and metaphysics. You can't do it. He does not like Orthodox Christianity, though. Is he an opponent or is he a friend of Christianity? He's primarily an opponent, but he's a friend as far as theism and a new interpretation of Christianity. He's not an atheist, okay? The people that primarily follow Hegel today are atheistic, which he would have thought they were insane because his system doesn't work without some sort of theistic view. Anyway, let me tell you what he doesn't like about Christianity. Christianity puts the focus on the next life. The goal of this life is really to know God and be saved and believe in Jesus so that you can be saved in the next life. That's the goal. This life doesn't have as much value. Who cares if you have money? Who cares if you live a good life and maximize your potential? All that's vanity anyway. You're going to die. What matters is the next world. So he thinks Christianity is detrimental to the world. You're not going to change it. You're not going to move world history forward. You're not really going to be your best. You're not going to actualize all your talents. You're busy giving your money away to the poor and trying to be humble and meek. You're not going to excel with the traditional view of Christianity. In his view, Jesus, to keep himself from being tainted by the world, withdraws. He doesn't change the things practically. He provides a means of salvation. So who cares what's going on politically, etc.? Again, you'll hear a lot of religious people today use this same kind of language. Put your hope in heaven, stop caring about politics, blah, blah, blah. They don't realize that they are playing into Hegel's trap, okay? The God of Christianity is transcendent over nature. Here's what Hegel wants. Hegel wants a God that is immanent, that is useful now, that also allows us to find higher value this side of eternity. Hegel thinks that humans find their value as they work together within the state, as they work together within the nation. They're able to participate in democracy. They're able to grow in education. They're able to push history forward, which is what Geist wants. And so in his mind, traditional Christianity cannot do that. And so that's kind of his reinterpretation of Christianity. He will separate when it comes to ethics, these two German ideas. One is Moralität, which is our internal moral rules. This goes back to like Kant, trying to act from this duty internally, etc. And Hegel will criticize that. And he's going to focus on what is called Sittlichkeit, which is ethical life like in the community and custom and society. So meaning internal ethical life, other thinkers have. He's trying to focus on this external community ethical life, which finds its fulfillment in the state. Speaking of the state, politics. Hegel wanted a constitutional monarchy. So I'm going to just summarize his politics. His politics have been very influential, whether you love it or hate it. Again, he tries to take everything. He's like, let's have individual rights, but also community. Let's have some state involvement, but not too much. He tries to, again, do some things that you can't always hold together. But let me summarize it for you. You're welcome. He wanted a constitutional monarchy. On the one hand, he's not a laissez-faire capitalist. On the other hand, though, he's not a communist. He didn't think there could be a universal world government contra certain forms of communism. The best way to think of Hegel, no, by the way, this is kind of a dialectic. You've got laissez-faire capitalism, a thesis, antithesis, communism, and then synthesis, kind of a proto-socialism. He was kind of, the best way to think of him, and again, this is anachronistic, but is kind of a proto-socialist. The difference, though, is he wanted trade guilds. Like back in the Middle Ages, you'd have a guild. If you were a blacksmith or you were a weaver or a farmer, you'd work together with other people in your trade. He wanted the guilds to be able to help guide society and talk to the government instead of just having the power in the hands of the government. That way there could be more interaction with them and the people. Anyway, he didn't like direct democracy because people are dumb. Anytime someone's like, yeah, I'm pro-democracy, just democracy, democracy, what you have to say is, so you think people could vote in slavery as long as they got more votes? You don't want pure democracy. That's the tyranny of the majority. You want to make sure individual rights are protected, even when people try to vote them away with democracy. Okay, so rights have to trump that. Okay, he thought that people were dumb, didn't really know what was best for them, so didn't love direct democracy. He thought this is very important for understanding Hegel's political view, because he does hold a view of positive rights. We have a tendency coming out of the Enlightenment to think of rights as individualism and negative liberty, right? The right to be left alone, the right to have people not get in your way. That's what the government owes you, negative rights. For Hegel, he doesn't think that that's the truest form of life. The truest form of life is in the state. It's in the community. It's within your cultural zeitgeist. There's Geist again. And so you find your highest freedom by being part of community, not by just pure individualism. Now, can community rights therefore overshadow individual rights? This is where he runs into some problems and, again, some contradictions. After Hegel, you have left and right-wing leaning Hegelians. The reason that there are some right-wing leaning Hegelians, which sounds crazy, is because Hegel's view is that the way the world is how it has to be so that spirit can evolve and reach its ultimate fulfillment. So yes, you have to go through bad things. You have to have the wars. You have to have individuals that kind of get sacrificed on the altar of history. You have to have that. And so things are the way they should be. That's conservative. That's right-wing. Most of those kind of people will kind of fade away, and it will primarily be the left-wing Hegelians that will end up owning the day, and then especially with Marxism, which is as far left-wing Hegelian as you can get, although it's not technical, true Hegel. Anyway, we'll talk about that on a lecture on Marx. Okay, I just need a break. Let me just, that was a lot. Okay, that was a lot. It's infuriating. It's difficult. I hope that some of that makes sense. Let's summarize, and then let's talk about some problems with Hegel, and then we're going to be done. And then you can reward yourself. Go get yourself a Cadbury cream egg. Really treat yourself today. You've worked hard. Let's summarize. I'm going to summarize all of Hegel's philosophy in 4 sentences. Are you ready? This comes from a guy named Darren Staloff. He's a professor of philosophy at the University of Florida. So this is not mine. This is his. These are going to be very incredible statements that do accurately capture Hegel's thought, and yet they're completely impossible to understand. Number 1, history is the dialectical process whereby spirit comes to know itself and realizes its idea. Number 2, freedom is the idea of spirit, and spirit is reason in and for itself. 3, the means of this realization or cunning of reason is the passions of the individual as both subject and object of history, and its form is the state. Number 4, the national spirit is a moment in the development of the world spirit, and for each such moment, as for all, the owl of Minerva spreads its wings only with the setting of dusk. Fantastic. What does it mean? It just means what we've been talking about. God and the world are evolving as one finds greater self-realization in the other. You have to do that because you have to take into account the whole of reality. You can't separate it or you're not understanding all of it. You can only understand the finite in relation to the infinite. You can only understand a subject in relation to the object. You have to have both. Hegel's not crazy. Oh, well, he is crazy. He's mad. But this is a smart idea, right or wrong. He's not a fool. This only comes to the end Minerva only spreads its wings only with the setting of dusk. It only comes to full self-realization for God as the end goal. All right. Problems with Hegel. Number one, his system is full of contradictions. For me, that's kind of the killer. That's kind of I understand what he's trying to do. I think that is the biggest Achilles heel of his system. Does he truly embrace contradiction? If he doesn't, he could be right. But if he does, he must be wrong. So that's something to wrestle with. Are these real contradictions, or do they just appear to us to be a contradiction because we're playing a different game than Hegel? It's a good way to ask the question. Number two, another problem with Hegel, because his system is a whole, if you disagree with a major part of it, the other parts start to crumble. So in the analytic tradition of philosophy, people start with a premise and they build on top of it. It's very foundationalist. In the continental tradition, though, there's a tendency to just kind of start talking and bring in an entire worldview. Well, if you disagree with Hegel's worldview, you're going to disagree with him. If you, for example, are an atheist, you're going to say Hegel is completely wrong. He has to be wrong. This is why it makes no sense for Marx to be Hegelian, or my buddy, Marx to be Hegelian, because he's an atheist. You can't be Hegelian and be an atheist because you need God for the system to work. Personal things. Number three, he says some things that are kind of racist-y. Now this, again, we don't want to do an ad hominem. We don't want to say his philosophy is wrong because he's a racist, but this is interesting. Everybody, by the way, before the modern era, we would see as a racist today. But let me read you this very interesting passage from Philosophy of Mind. We're not going to put it on the screen. I'm just going to read it. These are his words, not mine. So don't get mad at me. He says, I would never say this. He said, Negroes are to be regarded as a notion of children who remain immersed in their uninterested and indifferent naivete. They are sold and let themselves be sold without any reflection on whether this is right or not. Their religion has something childlike about it. They sense a higher being, but they do not keep a firm hold on it. It passes only fleetingly through their heads. This higher being they transfer to the first stone they come across, thus making it their fetish, and they discard this fetish if it fails to help them. Entirely good natured and harmless when in a state of calm, they can become suddenly agitated and then commit the most frightful cruelties. They cannot be denied a capacity for education. Not only have they here and there adopted Christianity with the greatest gratitude and spoken with emotion of the freedom they have acquired through Christianity after a long spiritual servitude, but in Haiti, they've even formed a state on Christian principles. But they do not show an inner impulse towards culture. In their native country, the most shocking despotism prevails. There they do not attain to the feeling of man's personality. Their mind is entirely dormant and it remains sunk within itself. It makes no progress and thus corresponds to the compact, undifferentiated mass of the African land. Yikes! Here he's talking about world history and he's talking about how there are different cultures that as Geist progresses, goes through different races and cultures. Then he says this about Caucasians, just in case you're thinking I'm misinterpreting him. Nope. He says some bad things. Yep. I don't support this, by the way. Either of these things, I distance. I hereby distance. This is not my view. This is Hegel's view. It is the Caucasian race. Notice he says race, though, not just culture. It is the Caucasian race that mind first attains to absolute unity with itself. Here, for the first time, mind enters into complete opposition to naturalness, apprehends itself in its absolute independence, breaks free from the oscillation between one extreme and the other, achieves self-determination, self-development, and thereby produces world history. The Mongols, as we have already mentioned, have for their character only the outward storming activity of an inundation, which dies away as quickly as it came, acts only destructively, constructs nothing, produces no advance in world history. We didn't talk about that, but he also says some harsh things against what he calls the Mongols. This advance comes about only through the Caucasian race. Ugh, so you get some of the kind of what foreshadows the Nietzschean blonde beasts of German superiority there. So that's a problem. Number 4, he's not a good scientist. Okay. He didn't believe in evolution. He disparaged Newton's views on motion. He held Aristotle's views of there only being 4 substances. And he made a case that there must necessarily be 4 planets around the sun. And then lastly, he is a terrible writer and communicator. Here's the question with which I want to leave you for Hegel, because this is a big question. Is he as brilliant as history has said that he is? Is he this major player? He's certainly a major player in influence. Should he be? Or does he hide some bad ideas in this very difficult to understand language? Here's my view. I think people that just dismiss Hegel and they just say, and I've heard a lot of, you'll especially get this with like undergraduate philosophy students. They'll say something like, Hegel's just hiding really advanced stuff, he's just hiding really bad arguments with his just difficult language so that you can't pin him down. I think that's too naive. I think it's a little too dismissive. I think there's some truth there, right? Like I feel like you can condense everything Hegel wants to say in probably 50 pages and not thousands. Hegel, I think, is writing this way intentionally, though. He's not trying to do the traditional Descartes binary thing. So I think he knows what he's doing with that. So is their critique valid? To some extent, yes, but it's too simple. Hegel, I think, is very smart. He's very well read. He knows a bunch about philosophy. I think he is probably a great mind. He could have been a greater mind had he said it clearly, but had he said it clearly, it would be going against the very project that he's trying to do. So that's my view of Hegel. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Thanks for tuning into Ideological. We've got other episodes. I'm about to do one on pirates and other things. Like, they won't all be this difficult. This one's difficult because I want to give you... What I like about our show is I like that there's some heady academic things, but I also like that there's fun things in culture. Most podcasts don't do both. I like that there's me teaching, but also interviews. So again, tooting my own horn. Toot, toot. I hope you will too. Does that mean to toot a horn for me? Don't toot my horn. Anyway, so thanks for tuning in. Good to see you. I can't see you. You can see me. Enjoy Hegel. Go read some Hegel today. All right. We'll see you next time.